Hereby call the Iberia Parish Council meeting of February 13th to order. It is now 6:04. We'll have the prayer by Ms. Broussard.
Dear Lord, we thank you for the many blessings that you have given us. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that we can meet here tonight, Lord, and try to do the parish's business, Lord. We just ask for you to guide us, Lord. Give us wisdom. Give us the ability to make decisions that are pleasing to you, Lord, and that are pleasing to the residents of Iberia Parish. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Gonsalas, the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Tommy Pollard. Michael Landry.
Here.
Tommy Landry.
Here.
Lloyd Brown. Warren Goshasang.
Here.
Natalie Broussard.
Here.
Paul Landry.
Here.
Ricky Gonsalas.
Here.
Joe Dugas. Eugene Olivier. Brian Napier.
Here.
Berwick Francis. Marty Trahan. Chad Mottram.
Okay, we have a quorum. Right now, we're going to need a motion and a second to go into public comments. I have a motion by Mr. Goshasang, a second by Mr. Brown. Roll call. Okay, now we're in public comments. Item number one, comments from the general public on non-agenda items. We don't have anybody on that. Item number two, comments from the general public on agenda items, persons being considered for appointment to the parish boards, commissions to address the council. Do we have anybody in the audience that's here to address for a board or commission? Seeing nobody, I'll ask a motion and a second to go back into regular session. Roll call. Oh, a motion by Mr. Goshasang, a second by Michael Landry. Roll call. Okay, now we're back in regular session. Reports, finance, and administration action, we have none. Reports, parish and government agencies, monthly building report dated January 2019 are in your packet. Public Works report, Public Works Department report for closed work orders dated January 14th to 18th, 21st to 25th, and 28th to February 1st were in your packet. Special business, we have none. Council member announcements. Do any of the council members have an announcement? Mr. Goshasang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to publicly announce a happy belated birthday to our Public Works Director, Herman Broussard, who celebrated his birthday yesterday, his 35th birthday. Happy birthday, Herman. Oh, and Mr. Gonsalas celebrated his Sunday. So happy birthday to him.
You said 75?
35. I yield, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Ms. Brenda's going to have an announcement.
This is a message from Mr. Eugene Olivier, Parish Council District 10 Councilman. Hello, everyone. Sorry I cannot be with you tonight. I would like to take this opportunity to express my support for summary number 19. After reviewing our current version of Louisiana Revised Statute 46, 1053B4, concerns of the medical staff, legal analysis by our legal advisor, and reviewing other hospital district board selections, I feel the changes introduced tonight are in the best interest of Iberia Parish and its citizens. I will also contact the Iberia Parish Legislative Delegation showing my support for proposed changes. Thanks. Eugene Olivier, Senior, Parish Council, District 10.
Okay, no other announcements. We'll move on to parish president announcements. Mr. Richard is in Lake Charles tonight, but just like Andy Griffin has Bonnie Fife and Fred Flintstone has Bonnie Rubble, we have Scott Saunier.
I guess I'll change my name to Barney tomorrow. No, he doesn't have anything. He just wanted everybody to know that he was at the Police Jury Commission meeting, conference, and that next week he would offer a report on that. I just wanted for the record, though, to say that Herman Broussard is older than I am. So we'll let that go. I'm not sure about you, Ricky. I don't know, but we'll find out after the meeting.
Okay, so moving on to consent agenda items for public hearing, we have the minutes of the regular meeting of January 23rd, 2019. Summary number 14, introduced by the Acadiana Fairgrounds Commission, a resolution accepting the resignation of Mr. Chance Lindsay as a member of the Acadiana Fairgrounds Commission effective immediately. Summary number 15, introduced by the Acadiana Fairgrounds, a resolution accepting the resignation of Mr. Marty Domang as a member of the Acadiana Fairgrounds Commission effective immediately. Summary number 16, introduced by Paul Landry, a resolution authorizing the parish president to execute a cooperative endeavor agreement by and between Iberia Parish Government and the Port of Iberia for the use of the old dynamic office building owned by and located at the Port of Iberia to utilize as office space for Iberia Parish Sheriff's Department, with the parish to provide the option of adding onto its general liability insurance and the payments of utilities for said building, and the Port of Iberia to provide flood insurance coverage on said building. Summary number 17, introduced by Paul Landry, a resolution authorizing the parish president to execute a cooperative endeavor agreement between Iberia Parish Government and the Iberia Parish Recreation and Playground Commission for the operation and maintenance of the Lydia Veterans Memorial Building. Is there any that we would like to pull out? Okay, Mr. Goshasan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remove summary number 17 from the consent agenda.
Okay, number 17. Okay, Mr. Tommy Landry?
I'd like to put a table on summary 16, the resolution authorizing the parish president with the
Okay,
cooperative
so,
and everything for the Port of Iberia.
so we're gonna be pulling out 16 and 17. So we'll be voting on the minutes, summary 14 and 15. So at this time, there's no further discussion? Okay, roll call. Oh, 1 minute.
Sit the motion in
Nope.
to accept.
We had a motion by Mr. Goshasan, a second by Mr. Gonsalas. Roll call. Those three motions pass. Now we'll go on to summary number 16. It's a resolution with the old dynamic office building. I think what it is here, they're still in the final stages of wrapping up a couple things on there. I don't know if Mr. Shealy wants to say any more. We're pretty close, but I think we'd probably want to wait another 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think y'all would want to see the final agreement
Right.
and what your responsibilities would be, so I would suggest 2 weeks.
Okay. They're moving pretty far on it. They've got most of the flood insurance and utilities down, but it's just a few other things. So at this time, we'll go ahead, a motion by Mr. Goshasan. Let's see, Ms. Broussard, do you want the floor?
Mr. Goshasan.
Okay, Ms. Goshasan?
I'll open it up for discussion, and then if you want, if there's no discussion, I'll go to table
Okay,
for 2 weeks.
I'm requesting a date on the table. How many tables would you
okay,
The last meeting of the month.
okay. Okay. Okay, Ms. Broussard?
I'm seconding the motion.
Okay, and Mr. Gonsalas, that was your requesting the date. So, Mr. Goshasan, you... Okay, 2 weeks. Okay, so we're voting on summary number 16 for a 2-week table. No further discussion? Roll call. Okay, that motion passes. Okay, now we're on to summary number 17. We have a motion by Mr. Goshasan.
Yep.
And a second by Mr. Gonsalas. Discussion?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I just rise in opposition to this. I just think we're putting on a burden on the Parks and Rec since they've taken over the RV park, so I don't agree with it, but I do agree with us finding someone to run the building or the facility like we've done before. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be hard. The woman did a very, very good job, her and the husband, of keeping it up. So I just wanted to state that for the record, Mr. Chairman, to remove it from the consent.
Okay, Mr. Gonsalas?
I think in this issue, when we're looking at the economic times that we're facing right now, some of the downsizing we can do in consolidation of services to better provide to people, we may have to look at a cost factor involved with hiring somebody else currently. So I just hope that we can support this and move it forward, and you let Park and Rec utilize their manpower to do this job.
Okay, Mr. Napier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was wondering if we had any response from Parks and Recreations on, obviously, I would think that they in favor of this, but do we have any response from them?
Yes.
Scott, or any,
Okay. I did speak to Miss Katie. Go ahead, Scott.
Katie?
Well, we probably both had the same conversation, and we've actually had this discussion in the past. They brought it up to us in the past, that they would be more than willing to do this.
So financially, they good with doing
Yeah,
the
they
work that
already
needs to be
have.
done?
The attractive thing for us is, I mean, I echo what Ricky just said, from a consolidation standpoint, if we do that smartly, then it makes sense for the parish. The other thing is, when you look at their operation, they've already got standard operating procedures and checklists. They do this at Willowwood, and they do it very
Right.
well. So Katie she's been very open to this, and actually, again, as I understand, the board is supporting it too. If you want to speak.
So it hasn't been proposed to the board yet, but as soon as I get information
Okay.
about it, we're gonna bring that up to the board. That's kind of why I'm here to see where we're going with this.
But Katie and y'all all good, my thing is are y'all good with it and can handle it, and we're not putting a burden on y'all?
The board has to make the final decision, so we have to present it to them.
Okay,
In regards to your question, Katie feels that there's no extra burden that's going to be placed upon them
okay.
in regards to what they do now.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, I'm good.
Mr. Dugal.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, right now, before this takes place, the Lydia Veterans Memorial Building is being funded by Public Buildings. Would that be correct? And so all the funding will be switched to Parks and Recreation from this point, or is Public Buildings still gonna provide the funding for Parks and Recreation to carry out the maintenance and operations of the building?
I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work. Kim, we just have to iron out some details, Joel, in regards to that.
Well, that's pretty important as far as I'm concerned, for me to vote on it. But anyway, thank you.
I did talk to Katie, and basically, we were right now, we're paying the building maintenance. So it was pretty certain that we would still fund that. The insurance part, because it would go under them now, she would have a slight increase in insurance, but it would be under an umbrella of the whole parish. If you look at the income that they were gathering, by the time you pay somebody to do that, I don't really think the building was really making anything at that point. So they would have staff on site to be able to take all this. It would be a plus for them. We would be saving, on the salary of the individuals. We're already paying the maintenance, for the building. I think it's an all-around win. So, Mr. Shealy, Katie did say that she'd like a resolution, coming from us to that. Can this summary number 17 be changed to substitute, just ask that this resolution go on to the Park and Rec, asking them to join this intergovernmental agreement so they can go to their board and put it on their agenda?
You could say a resolution requesting Iberia Parks, Recreation to assume the operation of the Lydia Veterans Memorial Building, if approved by Parks and Recreation's authorizing the parish president to execute it. That would be one way.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Dugar, you finished?
I'm done, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gosha?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you said right, because if I read it, it says Iberia Parish Recreation and Playground Commission for the operation and maintenance. So we're going to still hold the maintenance cost underneath public building and maintenance? Is that what you said?
We're going to take care of the building in case you have any type of, roof repair and things like that. I took that
Okay.
maintenance to be, cleaning the floor, and maintenance of, the restrooms and
grounds
things
and-
like
and
that
that-
and
okay.
everything.
All right, I just wanted that to clarify for the record.
That's good. Anything else?
I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Broussard?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we need to make any changes to this resolution. This is simply authorizing the parish president to execute the agreement. If Parks and Rec doesn't approve the agreement, then they're not gonna sign it. So, I mean, we're authorizing him to do it once they iron out all the details and get the agreement, he can sign off on it. They agree to it, they can sign off on it. I mean, we don't need to say pending their approval. I mean, they're not gonna sign it if they don't approve.
Okay.
So I think it's good like it is.
Okay, we didn't take a motion on that. That was just, okay. We have a motion, but not a motion on the substitute. So, okay, we're still on there. Mr. Gonsalas?
You got a second?
We don't need a second. We're not doing
Yep.
a motion.
We have Mr. Warren and yourself was the second on the original number 17. So no further discussion? Roll call? Mr. Brown? Okay, that motion passes. Okay, ordinance introduced for public hearing adoption, summary number 4975, introduced by Natalie Broussard, an ordinance amending Chapter 21 of the compiled ordinances of Beard Parish, Louisiana, to amend Section 21 to 48 to provide for additional requirements in connection with the medical staff nomination to the Hospital Service District Number 1 Board of Commissioners. Have a motion by Ms. Broussard, a second by Mr. Gonsalas. Ms. Broussard?
Yeah, in light of the summary number 19, which would be urging the legislative delegation to change it at the state level, I would request that this be deleted.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Gonsalas, you were the second?
I'll second that one.
Any other further discussion? Voting on the delete. Roll call. Okay, that motion passes. It's deleted. Summary number 4976, introduced by the Regional Planning Commission, an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Iberia Parish Code of Ordinance to enact Section 22-56, boundary line adjustments of the Iberia Parish subdivision regulations, all as recommended by the Regional Planning Commission. I have a motion by Ms. Broussard, a second by Michael Landry. Ms. Broussard?
I waive.
Michael Landry? No further discussion. Roll call. Tommy. That motion passes. Summary number 4977, introduced by Regional Planning Commission, an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Iberia Parish Code of Ordinances to create new regulations for the expiration of preliminary plat approval and to enact Section 22 to 55, expiration of preliminary plat approval of Iberia Parish subdivision regulations, all as recommended by the Regional Planning Commission. I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Ms. Broussard. Mr. Gonsalas?
I waive.
Ms. Broussard?
Waive.
No further discussion. Roll call. That motion passes. Summary number 4978, introduced by Regional Planning Commission, an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Iberia Parish Code of Ordinances to create new regulations for final plat approval and to replace Section 22-53, final approval of the Iberia Parish subdivision regulations, all as recommended by the Regional Planning Commission. Have a motion by Michael Landry, a second by Ms. Broussard. Michael Landry?
Waive.
Ms. Broussard?
Waive.
No further discussion. Roll call. That motion passes. Summary number 4979, introduced by Regional Planning Commission, an ordinance amending Chapter 22 of the Iberia Parish Code of Ordinances to create new private street requirements and enact Section 22-49 for private streets of Iberia Parish subdivision regulations, all as recommended by the Regional Planning Commission. Have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Ms. Broussard. Mr. Gonsalas?
I waive.
Ms. Broussard?
I waive.
I do think that to compliment Sarah on cleaning up our ordinance and addressing the issues that we've continually having problems with down the road. But this is a really good job, Sarah. Thank you so much.
Okay. Mr. Gashasan?
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman, I'd like to yield to the legal counsel on this one particularly in reference to private streets. Tell me what legally we can do and go and require private streets to meet certain conditions.
I don't mean this to sound flippant, so.
Go ahead.
But you pretty much can do anything you want to on private streets. And the one thing that everybody needs to be careful about is those private streets need to be built to a certain minimum standard, if you're gonna allow private streets.
Okay.
They need to be built to a certain minimum standard, and it needs to be clear to persons purchasing property along those private streets that those are private streets over which you have no authority of which you have only limited authority to control, that as a result of the fact that they're private streets, you have no intention to maintain them in the future, nor any obligation to do so. Because that's going to affect the value of that property. Because if you want to buy a piece of property on a private street, you know that the future maintenance and upkeep of that private street is only as good as the person or persons behind that subdivision.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you buy a property on a public road, you know that either the state or the parish is going to be responsible for maintaining that in the future. And I Sarah can address, what the requirements are that are in here, but, it needs to be a certain width because you're gonna have an issue of whether or not emergency vehicles can get down there. And there's a process by which it would be, reviewed by Public Works, reviewed by Sarah.
I guess the concern is those that are developed already, could it be reactive to those or retro to those that are, so it's only for new development, correct?
Only prospect.
Okay, so let me ask you, if there's a development that's already been developed and they want to extend, the new development of the extension would be held to the minimum standards as required in the resolution?
I would argue that they must meet the current standards. So if there's one in existence and they want to further develop deeper into that private road, they're going to have to meet the restrictions.
Now,
that
I want to clarify the current standard of our minimum standard or current standard for us to adopt the road of the parish current standard. Because I know if we want to adopt the road or they want the parish to take over that road, we have to have it at minimum requirements that the parish ordinance allows for, correct?
Yeah, and that's not being changed. In
Okay.
other words, they're gonna, if they want it taken in as a public road, they're gonna have to bring it up to your public road standards. I thought that the point of your question was, if you had an existing subdivision that had a private road
Correct.
that was below the standards that you're adopting here, and after adoption of this,
The expansion.
then there's an expansion. I would argue that the expansion is governed by the new
Okay.
ordinance that's in existence, and so that road
All
is
right.
going to have to be built to satisfy those standards.
I want good development, and I think she's on the right path, but I think the issue becomes of how much that good development is going to cost. Because there's going to be an additional cost to meet the requirements that she's asking for in here, and that could make or break some deals of development in this parish. So I'm kind of tore apart on this this deal. I mean, we've seen this in I guess residential neighborhoods and even trailer parks where we've seen a substantial difference in the rolling surfaces that we're required to uphold. So I would like to table this a little more to get more information from the public on this, especially developers, because this is gonna affect us long-term of requiring those expansions and what's entailed in that. And don't get me wrong, I've got neighborhoods in my district that some are not able to pass on because of the conditions they are. So I would just maybe ask us to table this one to the second meeting in February, if it's all right with the council, but
I'm gonna go on and finish.
I'm good with
different
that.
Discussion.
Thank you,
and
Mr.
we can
Chairman.
come back. Okay. Next up, we have Michael Landry.
I think Warren asked one of the questions, if we bring a private road in and down the line, they want to give it to the public, give it to the parish. They gotta have a certain standard that they have to meet. But also, I know we discussed a couple of meetings ago, if it's private, they need to develop something where they're gonna take care of those roads. I think we had a discussion on that. And does this address that situation?
It
does.
does, and I think it addresses it as best you can.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Gotchison said, we want quality development, and I think everybody agrees with that. But you have to remember that how many calls do all of you receive from people who live on a private road who say, well, I bought this lot and everything was going fine, but you know what? John Doe, who built that, he's now deceased, and his kids, they don't want to do anything about it. My road's deteriorating. I need you to do something. There's going to have, there has to be a weighing between cost and quality. You're doing something of a disservice to somebody who, well, there is a disservice being done, not necessarily by you. There's a disservice being done to people who unknowingly buy on private roads because they believe that somebody's going to take care of that road from here on out, and that's not necessarily the case. So you're just going to have to weigh who are you trying to protect? That is I think the real issue, and I think this ordinance goes as far as I understand most of you are willing to go. I would go further, but as far as what you're going to require of people who develop subdivisions along private roads to, number one, do as much as you can to notify the landowner that you're buying on a private road and you're doing so somewhat at your risk. And number two, to try to get at least an agreement or some form of document from the developer that he or she will provide proper maintenance of that road. Now, Sarah can, fill in the blanks, but
Yes, so if you look at section 12, well, section 12 of the ordinance is dedicated strictly to a maintenance agreement. So what'll happen is that we'll come up with a standard, basically a standard form. Now, some of your developers may put their maintenance, like if they build, a large gated private street development, right? They're probably going to have restrictive covenants, and within those restrictive covenants, there's going to be HOA requirements and yearly HOA dues, and they will put their maintenance in there. So they would be required to give us a copy of that, so we can make sure that maintenance checks all the boxes that we want it to check, right? For those people who maybe are not those large developers, but they have like 10 grandkids and they want to divide their property to give to their grandkids, so they're creating a private street. Well, we'll have a standard form that they can sign to say, listen, here's the maintenance. We know we're responsible for the maintenance and that type of stuff. We're also going to ensure that there is a note on the plat that says Iberia Parish government will not be responsible for maintaining your private street, basically. And I think that there's some additional language that we will have them, it's a paragraph it's under the maintenance. There's a paragraph under A that will be required to be placed on every single plat that lets people know that, at the end of the day, we're not going to upgrade their road. We're not going to come and grade their road. We're not going to come put gravel on their road. They are responsible for doing that. And that if something goes awry, it is a civil matter between all the people in the neighborhood, similar to a restrictive covenant in your neighborhood. We don't enforce neighborhood restrictive covenants. It's between the neighbors in there to enforce on the civil side.
I'm good.
And look, these are just minimum standards. We are more than happy for you to meet and exceed these standards, but these are minimum, so we can at least get something a little bit better than I think you've got going on out there right now with no regulations to regard to private streets at all. Like, the only type of street you can create right now is a public street. And again, as much as that's great, not everybody can afford to build a concrete asphalt 60-foot right-of-way curb and gutter public roadway. So this is kind of that in between. And there's some things that are set up in here where if you hit a certain amount of lots, And that number is based upon the sewer district, because once you hit 15 lots, sewer district requires you to put in a community treatment system. You're no longer allowed to put in private individual systems. So we pegged 15 to where you can no longer do gravel. You are required to do concrete or asphalt.
Okay, that's it. Just stay up there for a little while, Sarah.
Okay.
Mr. Dugal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I think this is a good idea is because when somebody's developing a parcel of land or whatever, and they have to build a private street, nobody ever intends for that private street to be private for the entirety of its lifetime. At some point, they want the government and municipalities to take over that street. Well, when you're building a street in the beginning, whether you build it 10 feet wide or 15 feet wide, it's not a whole lot of big difference in cost. The difference in cost is going to come over the surface material. So if you build a street to parish standards, the dimensions anyway, then later on, you don't have to worry about recreating the whole street to get it up to standard. So it's a good move on our part, and it's prudent. I think that's what we need to do, and have everybody build those streets to the dimensions that we require. And later on, if we have to take them over, we don't have to rebuild the whole road. So, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Napier.
Yeah, Sarah, just
Yes, sir.
for my own personal, you good with this? Planning and zoning is,
Yes,
you have
sir.
any reservations about this? whole deal?
Absolutely not, no. And you know, Herman has taken a look at this, and we've had the fire
He was
district.
gonna be the next one I asked, so
Yeah.
I'm glad. So you speaking for Herman too?
I can if you want, but Herman's right here if he'd like to stand
No,
up.
I mean, I was just wondering.
No, Public Works has taken a look at this, so is the fire district.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Gonsalas.
Yeah, I think I echo some of you guys' comments, but you know, as a governing body, we strive for quality of life in our parish. And if you look at our surrounding parishes that are growing, they all have ordinances that govern private streets, and we don't have any. So I think this is just a prudent move, like Joe said, moving in the right direction to have a set standard for when we're developing private roads. And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's just very simplistic.
And look, I mean, I went, as Andy said, you know, I didn't go probably as high as what can be done, but you know, your ordinance, your regulations are a living, breathing document. They are meant to change over time. So again, if we get into this a year down the road and we're like, you know what, either something is not working or maybe we need to go up in higher in standard, that is definitely something we can do. This is not something that is set in stone, you know, for the next 50 years. It's meant to grow as we grow as a community.
Okay, at this time, we'll go back to Mr. Gashasan.
Issues if they want to table it or not. If they want to take the vote, it's fine.
Okay, well, are you offering a motion?
Motion to table for the second meeting in February.
Okay, so we have a motion. Does anybody want to go with a second? Seeing no second, that fails. We'll go back to voting on 4979 as it originally is. Roll call. Okay, that motion passes. Okay, resolutions introduced for public hearing and adoption. Summary number 18, introduced by the Airport Authority, a resolution amending the 2019 Airport Authority fund budget in the total amount of $666,667 to appropriate funding for A, to recognize additional state funding through facility planning and control for hangar number 88 project in the amount of $200,000 and to appropriate $66,667 from the fund balance previous year's line item for required matching funds. B, for the Iberio Industrial Development Foundation serving as interim director in the amount of $36,000 to be funded from personal services administration. And C, to recognize state grant funding and engineering services in the amount of $400,000 for the ARFF design project. I have a motion by Ms. Broussard, a second by Mr. Gonsalas. Ms. Broussard?
Waive.
Mr. Gonsalas?
I'll waive as well.
No further discussion. Roll call. Okay, that motion passes. Okay, summary number 19, introduced by Lloyd Brown, District 4, a resolution urging and requesting the Iberia Parish Legislative Delegation to take any and all necessary steps for the proper introduction and adoption during 2019 regular session of the Louisiana Legislature, an amendment to LARS 46.1053B4 relating to the Board of Commissioners of Iberia Parish Hospital, Service District Number 1, as set forth herewith, to provide for the effective date thereof, and otherwise to provide with respective thereto. I have a motion by Mr. Brown, and I have a second by Mr. Gashassan. Mr. Brown?
Yes. Before you go, Brown, Mr. Chairman, before there's any discussion, we'd have to suspend the rules to allow for,
Yep, that's it. Okay, I'm looking for a motion to suspend the rules
Yep,
because
that's
we
what you were doing, or
skipped.
you
I have a
wanna say-
motion by Ms. Broussard, a second by Mr. Gonsalas. Ms. Broussard?
I move to suspend the rules.
Okay, second motion, roll call. Ms. Broussard? Mr. Brown? Tom? Okay, that motion passes. We've suspended the rules. We skipped committee for anyone questioning what we just did. Okay, now we're on summary number 19. I need a motion. A motion by Mr. Brown, a second by Mr. Gashassan. Mr. Brown?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, Mr. Gashassan?
Mr. Chairman, if I may address Mr. Brown, I guess I had a question of the point of how we got here. I know the Medical Executive Committee unanimously approved it, correct? And has the hospital board had a chance to look at this and make a decision?
There was a representative.
It was there. Okay, so there was a, go ahead.
Representative there from the hospital board.
Okay. All right. I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I'll ask tonight, the reason we're putting it at full council, just so that the public knows, is we have a time frame that has to meet in order for it to be enrolled in the legislature,
That
correct?
is correct.
Okay. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Broussard?
Yeah, it's my understanding, Mr. Brown, did you want to make the substitute motion, or did you want me to make the substitute motion for some of the
Yeah, there needs to be a substitute motion. If I could, I just want to point out a couple of things to you before any substitute motion is made. When this resolution was initially drafted, what I've done is I've placed or had asked that an item be placed at your desk that is substantially like the information in the resolution, with a couple of changes that are made. The first one is, we talked about the appointments being made by the medical staff. However, after talking with the physicians, medical staff is not a very defined term, and so it's medical executive committee. That is a formal committee, and then we added physicians who are fully credentialed and in good standing. And they're actually in good standing with the medical executive committee, not the credentials committee and the board of commissioners, so it needs to be medical executive committee. And that's the changes. One other one that was added was as for the commission member that expires in November 2019, or the resignation, that was added. So that's the only three changes from the original resolution that was in your packet, and it now is consistent with what is before you. I just wanted to make sure that you. Yes.
Mr. Shealy, I had a question about the no member of the board shall serve more than 3 consecutive terms. I know there was some discussions about whether it was 3 terms or 4 terms. Has
3, that is consistent with your home rule charter, and that was satisfactory.
all right. So I would make the substitute motion to amend the language to what you proposed and put in front of us tonight.
Okay. You finished, Ms. Broussard?
Yes.
Tommy Landry?
Yeah, I see that. I think, Larry, you're the only member here from the hospital, representing the hospital. I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions and kind of follow along with where Brian was going. I mean, Warren, I'm sorry. And just so, you know, I know we've both taken a lot of heat the last couple of weeks and all this stuff.
Yeah,
and
I've been
and I'm
looking for my
surprised that
mama.
half the audience is not filled with physicians and people from the hospital. I'm really surprised there's only one person here. I thought it would be a little bit more, but I'm glad it's like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
what I'd like to know is kind of where Warren was going. I spoke to 4 board members today that were not really sure about what was being proposed here tonight, okay? And they were not included in the process.
That's correct.
And the answer that I got from Paul, and I asked Paul, I hadn't talked to Andy, but basically it's us and the doctors, and the board's not.
Yes, sir. Y'all, the way I understand it, and that's, you know, from Andy and the district attorney's group, we're not the appointing authority. Y'all are the appointing authority, so you're the ones that can change the statutes and stuff like that. We're just a product of the appointing authority at the end of the day. I've tried to inform any of my board members call me. I informed them I was a representative in that meeting. You know, I was able to give my input. You know, but it was primarily the council members of the council and the council representatives and you guys. Mr. Shealy was there and a representative group of the doctors. So at the end of the day, you're right, our board was not, you know, part of this loop. Now, Friday evening, I was trying to inform the hospital board. I let them know what I thought was the direction that was agreed upon between the doctors and the council representatives at that time. Once again, we technically don't have a dog in this fight, you know, even though we're the byproduct of what you guys do at the end of the day.
Well, I just find it disturbing that the board
Yeah,
is not involved in it and
yeah.
didn't even have a chance to
And
analyze
like I said,
it.
yeah, we're the byproduct of it.
And I understand the time frame stuff. I
Yeah.
just think it's going too fast.
And
Too
actually,
fast for
we're
me.
meeting Friday
Okay.
at lunchtime, pending the
But
outcome
that's
of
gonna be after
tonight.
the vote.
Yes, sir. Because we can only abide by what y'all do. You know,
I
if
understand.
that makes any sense. And so, whatever actions y'all take tonight, I got a board meeting scheduled for Friday at noon to discuss those actions and what direction all this is heading in.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Okay, next up, Mr. Dugal.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to some of the comments that were made earlier. Mr. Goshen had a question about the board, and Mr. Brown said that one member of the board was present. Normal situation? Yeah, and I want to make sure I understood what you said. Typically, one board member from a board doesn't have the jurisdiction or the authority to represent that whole board without being placed on an agenda item and the whole board being fulfilled. And
I understand.
Mr. Shealy, his comment was that board doesn't have a dog in the fight or had no authority in that matter. Is that right?
Mr. Henskins is correct that you are the appointing authority and that the legislature sets forth the methodology by which those appointments are made. I think it was wise and smart to have a representative from the hospital board there. I'll tell you this, everybody there has some pretty strong opinions, but I will say this. There was one common goal among everybody in that room, and that was to come up with a selection process that yielded the best possible appointments to the hospital board and to the operations of the hospital in an effort to make sure that the highest quality health care was provided to the citizens. There were a lot of differing opinions, but I was impressed of how everybody came together with one goal. Is it a perfect instrument? probably not, but I can tell you this, it's a whole lot better than the way the legislation reads now. The process within the legislation now is certainly not very precise on the selection process, and it's kind of like making sausage. It's not pretty when you make it, but it's pretty good when you eat it. So I think this came about as a consensus, and it's my understanding that the physicians were unanimous or close to unanimous in support of this. So hope that answers your question.
So what I heard in your response was a little doubt that this may not be the best thing, but it's something, okay?
No doubt in my mind. that it's the
Okay,
best
so,
thing.
I mean, why are we rushing this then? Should we give it a little more thought?
I can
It may be
address
the
that.
best thing, but I'm not.
There's two reasons. You're coming up on a 2019 regular session of the legislature. This is a local or special bill. Local or special bills require advertisement prior to the introduction of those bills. Those advertisement will actually, I think, appear in the paper on Friday and then sometimes next week. That's a requirement first for the introduction of the bill. The second issue that you have anytime you have what I call a short session is that every legislator only has 5 bills. So they quickly run out of bills that are promised. So in order to find a sponsor for legislation, if you don't get on the front end, you find yourself can't find a legislator to introduce the legislation because they've already committed for their 5 bills. So that's the reason for the speed. And I think another reason is this was a good faith effort on the part of everybody to craft a more precise process for selecting members, and everybody wants to move forward. So those were the reasons why it was a rush, if that's the way you want to describe it, to place this on tonight's agenda.
So my question right now is if the statute is vague, which it seems to be very vague because you can read through and get different interpretations all throughout the thing, why can't we develop something locally that clears all this up instead of rushing it through, pushing it? I'm not against what the doctors are trying to do. I have no problem with that. I'm just concerned that you got 2 different factions here pushing hard against each other, and I don't want it to wind up too much on one side or the other side. It needs to be best for the people of the community.
This is addressed in the legislation, so it needs to be handled in the legislature, not locally. I have a different take on things, on this. Look, when you come to a compromise, it doesn't look like you got 2 sides pushing against each other. It looks like to me, when you have a compromise that was reached, you have a situation where people are saying, let's come together, let's solve this appointment ambiguity, if that's what you want to call it, and let's move forward and let's make Iberia Medical Center the best hospital possible, the highest level of health care delivered to our people. I think it's a mischaracterization to say that you have 2 groups pushing against each other. You have 2 groups that have differing opinions, but they clearly came together in a compromise.
And I'm talking about the board that's appointed by this council, and I'm talking about the medical, the doctors. I mean, we've heard tonight that the board wasn't involved in this process. So there's a lot of pushback coming from those guys.
Go ahead, because if you don't, I'll answer it.
You have, using your words, you have pushback coming with all due respect to Mr. Henskins, because he has been a very integral part of this. But you're getting pushback, apparently getting pushback from some members of a board that, to a certain extent, using language that's already been used, doesn't have a real dog in this hunt. This selection process, the changes to this selection process really relate, and you need to focus on this, to the methodology by which the physicians express their preference as to an appointment. It's really about the physician appointments, the 2 physician medical seats on the hospital board. That's what this is about. And I think that's what Mr. Henskin said when he stepped up here, that although they're a byproduct,
We are, yeah.
the methodology by which it's done is the council. This is a board or commission of Iberia Parish government, and you have come up with I think, a excellent resolution that hospitals have to have doctors, doctors have to have hospitals. You've come together, you've worked through it, you've created a better mousetrap, it looks like to me, is what you've really done.
I've never questioned the doctors wanting to, the hospital wanting to appoint those doctors. That's not the question here. I'm not questioning all that. My question was how we got to this point and how do we keep from getting back to this point. And legislation may fix that. I would just like a little more time. This kind of came pretty quick, so I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up, Michael Landry.
If I'm understanding, your board do not have to vote on this resolution?
No,
we're
sir.
doing
My
tonight?
meeting with them Friday at noon is an informative meeting. It's not a voting meeting.
And I really want to commend you, the members of the council, and the medical staff who met and tried to hammer out some kind of resolution. I know we had some problems, but I really want to commend y'all because I think y'all really worked. And people called and people are calling, you know. But I think we do need to, I agree with Andy, we got to address this situation and hopefully we don't have nothing else comes up. But I want to commend everybody who worked on this, and it may not be perfect, and I realize this, but I think we can use this as a stepping stone, a jumping off point to make it perfect. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Napier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Henskin, maybe you can answer a question. It says in what Mr. Shealy gave us, the medical staff members eligible for service on the Board of Commissioners of Iberia Parish Hospital District Number 1 shall be physicians who are fully credentialed and in good standings with the Credentials Committee, Medical Executive Committee, and Board of Commissioners of the district. These doctors that are going to be appointed by other physicians, can doctors who are employed by the hospital
Yes, sir.
serve on this without any ethics? Is that a concern?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's not a concern. There's an employed physician right now, Dr. Kirk O'Brien, and he's an employed physician. He's vice chair of the board, and there's opinions out there that
Can
you
I
want to
say,
take that,
y'all are asking Mr. Henskins a legal question.
Yeah. That's all right.
You're putting him in a difficult position. But no, Mr. Napier, your question is
Yeah,
very no. But
okay.
let me. There is an exception in the ethics code specifically for physicians to allow them to serve on hospital boards, even though they may have an economic interest in decisions that are made. Now, as to decisions that affect them personally, themselves directly, there is the need to recuse themselves in making those votes. But generally without that, there would be a difficulty, but there is a specific
So
provision of
there-
ethics code.
No,
That's
no
correct.
problem with that.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. Shealy. And, Larry, I just want to say, just for myself, I'm like Tommy Landry. I took a whole lot of heat from 2 weeks ago. And my only, intention in my vote, was always, since the day I sat here, was for the betterment of whatever entity that I'm voting on. And I know the hospital is very important, and some of the flack that I got because of my vote was very unwarranted, very upsetting to me. But I just want you to know, and I want the hospital to know, that I think we all took it serious, and some of the criticism we got was surely unfair to us, but we are all wanting to make and give the board best members that we can, and we want the hospital to flourish. We want the administration to keep they're doing a good job.
Yes.
But when, it just, you know what, it's probably best I stop. But I just want you to know that my vote was for I thought the betterment of the hospital. Nothing against nobody else, none of the doctors or anything. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I understand.
Okay, next up, Tommy Landry.
I just want to make it clear also that I'm for cleaning up this thing, because it needs to be cleaned up. I don't have to, agree with the way it was done. Okay, I got my disagreements about that, but I don't want to speak about it anymore. But I'm definitely behind the fact that this thing needs to be cleaned up as quickly as it can. I just think it went a little too fast for me, and that's all I got to say.
Okay, next up, Mr. Ghanshyam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this will be my last question. Larry, I have a lot of respect for you, and I want to ask you on the record, do you feel not just this is best for the hospital, but the people that go there to get the services, what we're doing here tonight is the best thing for it?
Very much so.
Okay.
Like Mr. Shilley alluded to, is that when we had these meetings to try and get some common ground to
Okay.
go forward from the vote a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't all roses. We had some tense moments in those meetings, and Mr. Brown could recognize that also. But at the end of the day, the doctors and your representatives here, as Mr. Shealy mentioned a minute ago, we all want to do what's common good for this community, which is the common good for the hospital. So at the end of the day, this is a good step moving forward.
And I too would like to thank you for what you do for the community, but also I want to thank the council too, because I think, you had people that were on both sides of the ball, but we were all respectful of where we went with this, and I think we all have this community at heart. But this is our local government at work. This is what we were intended to do. We're not going to pave the best road. There's going to be bumps in it, but I think we're all heading in the right direction, Mr. Shealy, and you're absolutely right. I just want what's best for that hospital, because without quality health care, there is no community here. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I waited and everybody said something, but I just want to say this, that what we voted on and how we voted this council, nobody did nothing wrong. That wasn't said through this discussion just now, but I just want to bring that out, that it was said that we had done something wrong when we voted. We did nothing wrong. Everything was legal what we did.
Okay, just to kind of clear the record on this, some of us feel this started the last couple of weeks. The first emails I saw was August and September. I guess Brenda got brought in about October. Me, Tommy, and Andy started in probably November. Going back and forth some of these things, and everything was always geared toward the medical community. If some of the board members of the hospital are upset, I'm sorry, they could always call, and there was nothing, but it really, it wasn't for them to be there. Bo Dewey sat down and encouraged Andy to come. My first meeting was me, Mr. Brown, and for the doctors, and then, you know, it was good that Larry came in and Andy came in, and you're right. I thought one time Mr. Falterman was walking out on us. I didn't know what I was gonna do then, but it went back and forth, and it was some good conversations, and, you know, I think every side got heard, but this was directed from the council to the medical community. I didn't think we needed to bring the administration, you know, with, not ours, the hospital's administration, that wasn't for them. And I think it was the best way it went. And so this, it might be quick for some of us, but this has to be done. The February 13th date filing is today. We'll get, you know, if this passes to Fred, and it'll be a good process. So no further discussion, roll call. Yep. Roll call. That motion passes. Okay, after that, I need a motion for adjournment. I have a motion by Mr. Gonsalas, a second by Ms. Broussard. Roll call. 5 minutes.